Not yet.
Now.
Joys of technology.
Okay. So the Beecher location is, what is the purpose of that site? Is that where you get your trees? Or
No, it's just another
it's just another
manufacturing facility.
Where does the wood come from? I'm just curious.
The wood comes from all over the United States
Okay.
and Canada.
Okay. And has it always, or because especially in Chicago, a lot of Chicago's wooden buildings were built with wood from the forests of Wisconsin and Michigan.
Really what this one saying? Isn't it?
No, that's a sign
Flip
there.
it over.
Oops.
Oh, okay.
And then you can print and sign on the same line.
Okay, I write kind of big, so.
Oh, but yeah, that's fine. We will be able to distinguish. Thank you.
Okay. Is this the same as that one?
Mm-hmm.
So print,
Yeah.
sign, date.
Well, I'll go back to some current questions. How many employees does Lange Brothers employ just at this location?
We employ 48 altogether.
Oh,
At this
wow.
location, probably about 20, 22.
Okay. Do people come from all over the city or Thurston Woods specifically?
No, people come from all over the
Okay.
5-county area or whatever around here.
What's your sense of the community? Do you come here every day?
Yep.
Do you live in Thurston Woods too?
No.
Okay.
I grew up down on 39th Street,
Uh-huh.
but not. I always think of Thurston Woods as being over by 34th and
35th to
35th.
Uh-huh. So
32nd or something.
down. Okay.
Is that technically
Thank
where
you.
it is, or where is Thurston
We've
Woods?
heard a
according
bunch
to?
of different things. So what we have in mind is from Teutonia to Sherman, and then Silver Spring to Mill Road.
Okay.
But
Well, I grew up in that area.
okay.
Okay. Yeah, Thurston Forest really was from 35th maybe to, just let me think a second here, 34th, 33rd, about 32nd.
Okay.
And then beyond that was all farmland, and a half a block north of Thurston, going north was all farmland. And I'm talking now
Okay.
in the mid-40s.
Uh-huh.
And then everything else, the whole area was considered town of Granville at that time.
Okay.
Which was a little village. And,
Yeah.
and town of Granville started on Silver Spring and went north. And Thurston Forest, I don't know who came up with the name, but there were a lot of big trees there in the old days, and there were a lot of larger houses built in that area. And I assume you've driven around, and you know, on 34th and Thurston, there's a log house on the north.
Yeah, I've seen that.
And that was an architect. And,
Oh, okay.
and I don't know if he started this, but it was Bierman was his name, and they lived there for a long time. And you've been in Mavis's house.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. And that was my uncle's house from this company, and my dad lived on 34th Street,
Okay.
just south of Thurston.
Right.
So-
And her nephew lives there now?
Yeah.
Mavis's nephew?
Darryl.
Mm.
Yeah. So have you been in there at all? Or?
No, we haven't.
Oh.
We haven't contacted him yet.
Yeah.
We only have a short amount of time. I
Okay.
wish we had a bit
Well,
more
Mavis
time.
is kind of the mayor of that area now. She
Yeah.
really watches over everything, and we see her at parties for my cousin, who was my uncle's son, and she still comes to his Christmas parties and different things, and as we get to see her and her husband, Tom, I think her husband's Tom.
Yep.
Yeah.
She's a very active person.
Yes, oh yeah, very active, very, very active.
So I was asking, in the past, were most of the employees from the nearby area, were most of the employees from Thurston Woods itself here at Lange Brothers?
I would say they were larger. I mean, you're talking Good Hope to Silver Spring and Sherman to Teutonia.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I would say most of them came from out of that area. In
Oh.
the city, more in the city.
And even in the 30s and 40s?
There were some that came from this area,
Mm-hmm.
but I would say at the most half that I could.
Okay.
I really kind of remember from the mid 40s.
Okay.
I remember the war years. I mean, this place
Yeah.
worked 24 hours a day during the war.
During the war?
Yeah.
Oh, making...
They did all kinds of. They built stools. Every lady that worked in
Oh.
a factory had to have a stool to sit on. So they built a tremendous amount of wood stools. They did boxes for parts, boxes with a lot of little dividers in them for assembly.
Ship.
They built workbenches. It was all war production.
Were women employed here?
There was one. She worked in the office, and she worked here before the war. And then during the war, there was really no. She did. We did all residential work,
Okay.
and she did a lot of the writing up for that kind of stuff. And when the war production came along, they worked. I forgot what it was, but some government agency would come in here with an order, and they would just have to build it. So then she went out in the plant and worked. And there's a machine out in the plant here that still has her writing on it.
Oh, wow. I'd like to get a picture of that
Okay.
if you'll let
I
me
can
back
see if we
there.
can still decipher it. But
Oh,
clean it
advanced.
off, right?
Advanced.
That's fine.
Yeah.
I'm sure I've seen worse.
But that was the only lady that we had working. But now up north, they have half, if not more than half,
I would say it's about half, yeah.
are women in the
Okay.
plant.
And so when you were growing up, what was your impression of Thurston Woods? Did it feel like a suburb or?
Well, we lived
Feel like-
on 37th Street,
Mhm.
and I could sit here and see the house. We would walk back and forth. There was nothing here. This is all fields, and this was a big berry farm over here, and that's why it's called Berryland Housing.
see.
They actually raised berries there.
That was my
They
question.
did all the stuff with horses and everything.
Strawberries?
Raspberries. It's a
Raspberries,
big
okay.
raspberry farm. The whole thing was raspberries. And we would walk back and forth. And then during the war, my dad somehow bought this lot on 34th Street. It was the last lot on that street. So the majority of those houses in that area were built late 30s or up to 41. I think most of them were built in the late 30s. And then he bought the lot, and in 46 he put a house up there. And then my uncle bought the other lot on 35th Street where
Yeah.
Mavis lives.
Yeah.
And my uncle's father-in-law was a carpenter contractor, and he built both those houses. And then he retired and he worked here after that.
Your uncle's father-in-law?
Uncle's father-in-law, yeah. Right.
So when you said you'd walk back and forth, were you walking here or walking
Yes,
to
yeah,
school?
yeah. My dad
Oh.
would walk back and forth to work.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, he'd leave the house in the morning, come down here with his lunch pail. They always ate out of a lunch pail and walk home in the evening. And my uncle lived further down on 37th Street, between Florist and Thurston. And then they both moved. They both built bigger houses after the war and moved into those houses.
So I didn't really realize that Lange Brothers wasn't the way maybe it was the way Mavis described it, but I thought that Lange Brothers also built her house, but you said it's your uncle's father-in-law.
That's my uncle's house, but he is Lange
He
Brothers.
is okay.
Yeah, there was my uncle and my dad were partners. They were the Lange Brothers.
So Lange Brothers did do construction too?
No.
They
we
did the millwork.
All the woodwork
Okay.
inside
The
the
windows,
house.
the doors, the moldings, the mantles.
So it was kind of a separate entity that
That did the actual rough carpentry.
okay.
Right.
The rough carpentry was done by his father-in-law.
Uh-huh.
The millwork is what Lange Brothers always does.
And that company did a few different homes, didn't they? I've seen one down, I think, on 38th and Thurston.
39th and Thurston, there's a two-story, a flat.
With kind of iron-colored trim.
Yeah, right.
Yeah.
Well, I don't know what I've been by there, but it's got some gingerbread around the outside on the top and
that's
everything. And that house was owned by my uncle, and it was built by his father-in-law.
Okay.
And then in later years, my uncle sold it to my dad, and I lived in that house for a while.
Oh, you did?
Yeah,
Okay.
that flat upstairs.
Are there many houses around the neighborhood that?
There's another one just south of that on the east side of 39th Street where the father-in-law actually lived.
Okay.
And I lived in a house just 3 doors north of him that we had built in, I think, 1958.
So I was thinking that Lange Brothers was building these for different families, but they're
No.
all kind of Lange inhabited.
Right. We just
That's right.
did the interior, all the woodwork. In those days, we built all the windows, made all the windows, the doors, basement windows, the whole package.
So on a kind of a larger question, how have you seen Thurston Woods change over the years? Both of you, Laura, you too.
Well, in my time, it expanded a lot. And when we moved there, we could go a half a block north, and we just had open fields and woods, and you know, we could play, and we could go to the east, 3 blocks. I mean, before we got to Titonia, there was like 2 blocks of just open land. Titonia was a little 2-lane road. As Silver Spring was just a 2-lane road. But the neighborhood itself changed very, very little in all the years that we lived there. To me, the turnover in the houses maybe was one or 2 families at the most. Mostly one family. You know, the original family was in there and then was sold later on, and the second family moved in.
I think a few of the people we've interviewed have they're either the second or third occupant in their house. And
To me, it was a slow turnover. I don't know what it's like now. We sold the house 3 years ago, 3 or 4 years ago. My mother's house.
Oh, your mom's house.
Yeah.
I was saying, your house?
No, not my house. No, the mother's house we sold.
Yeah.
Mavis. When Mavis moved in, she told us she wanted that house, my mother's house, for somebody, and my mother was real slow in deciding. And finally, we decided, and we called Mavis, and bingo, that was it.
His mom lived to 104.
Wow.
So.
Healthy family.
Yeah, she was good until the morning, the last day. So.
And you keep mentioning the fields. What did they grow in the fields?
It was just fields, just.
Just
there wasn't
like
there,
prairie.
They're like prairie grass.
Okay.
Yeah, this was a farm here, and the barns just down the street. And there was a fella there, Ben Wilcox, was the owner of the whole area, and he would ride around in a car being chauffeured. And Ben was the farm man, and he did it with horses and everything. But everything else from here, along Titonia, there were greenhouses. On both sides of Titonia, it was all greenhouses, and they raised flowers. But then from 35th over, there was hardly any houses at all. It was just open fields with grass.
What was the greatest period of change?
Right after the war.
Okay.
Yeah, I would say, you know, from what my folks built in 46, that was one of the first houses that we worked on, and going up to the 50s, it all started building to the north. That whole field area built up. 36th Street was all fields, and that built up, and then all of this built it. There's a lot of this in here was prefab housing without basements, and it was for military people coming out of the war. But there was one house in this area in the early 40s. Otherwise, it was completely open. Actually, this area to the east of 39th Street was a swamp. It was all water, and it was all filled in. And we were on top of a hill up here, and then they graded it all off. They changed the grade tremendously. Cut this down and filled that area in down there.
Was that for a civic project?
The city did that. I don't know.
Just
wanted to fill that swamp in.
Oh, okay. The train was already running through, right?
Oh yeah.
Okay.
The train's been here
Yeah.
forever.
And
I can remember steam trains running up there.
There is no train station in this neighborhood, though. Okay. So the greatest period of change was right after the war. How old were you, and how did that feel?
I was born in 34, so it really didn't. I mean, we kind of missed the fields. I mean, we had holes that we dug for forts, you know, and we did all kinds of goofy stuff, and we had a lot of room to run around. And all of a sudden, it was just being built up all over. Some of the first houses that I remember being built, they dug the basements with horses. They had a sled, and they would go just continuously back and forth, and just keep digging and digging and digging. And that's the way they dug the basements. The first ones, and then later on they came with the power shovels and things.
Wow.
And,
Do you remember which house it was? Is the house you said there was only one in the neighborhood?
yeah, it's down 39th, and it's, well, the first few houses are the prefab ones, and then there's kind of an older house, and it's that one there. And that house was built, I can't think of the name of the people, but it was built, and the owners, the people that were moving in were finishing it, doing the varnishing and everything else.
Uh-huh.
And the day before, a day or two before they were going to move in, they had done a lot of painting and stuff,
Uh-huh.
and the house burned down.
Oh.
And they supposedly had rags laying around, and they felt it was, combustion. The house burned down to the ground.
And they rebuilt.
They rebuilt, yeah.
But
Same
wow.
house.
Yeah.
But I can remember that.
And you, Laurie, how's the neighborhood changed since you've been around?
Well, when I grew up on 39th Street, there were always houses all around.
Uh-huh.
And it was always a very family-oriented, safe neighborhood. And we used to ride our bikes from there over to our grandparents' house over on
Yeah.
34th.
34th, and used to go back and forth and play around. We used to ride our bikes all the way down here.
Did you play in the streets a lot or the alleys?
In the alleys and on the sidewalks.
Uh-huh. What did you play? Just.
Oh, all sorts of,
Uh-huh.
typical silly riding your bike and playing with the wagons and
Mm-hmm. Taking walks.
taking walks. Yeah, it was always a nice neighborhood at that time, a very safe neighborhood, a very family neighborhood. I mean, we used to go trick-or-treating, as kids. And, I live farther out in the country now, and you get a few kids. I mean, we used to have, I think, hundreds of kids.
Yeah.
In my
The
memory,
sidewalk would be just full of
kids,
children up and down the sidewalk.
It's a different experience when you live more out in a subdivision than when you live in a city like this, where there was always a lot of people around, a lot of kids to play with. When you live farther out in the country, you have one or two neighbors.
Yeah.
Here, there were always just tons of them. We walked to school every day. School wasn't far away.
Where did you go to school?
Carleton.
Okay. Yeah, I'm from a very rural Indiana town where my nearest neighbor is a mile away, so I'm kind of jealous of that childhood.
That's it.
But
it's a different feeling. You could,
Yeah.
play a couple houses down, especially when you're younger. It's like you didn't cross. I can remember when we were young, we couldn't cross Thurston because that was too busy of a street to cross. And now you sort of look at that and chuckle. But then when we got older, we could ride our bikes all the way down here and come down and work at the shop or come down and visit. And
Did you come to work with your dad much?
We started working here when we were in high school.
Oh, okay.
But before that, we came down because we had a garden out back of the facility, and we would garden on the weekends and
vegetables or
and raspberries.
Oh, red raspberries or black raspberries?
Red.
Oh, okay. They're all black raspberries where I'm from.
Whereabouts in Indiana are you from?
Near South Bend, or
Okay, sure.
Yeah, so it's not too far from here actually.
Yeah. You go to that. I want to change the subject. Go to that restaurant in South Bend, that Studebaker Mansion.
Oh,
Ever been to that?
I've walked around the building, but I haven't.
You get good food there. It's not that expensive.
It's a beautiful building too.
Yeah.
So I was asking you about the trees earlier, and wondering if you got now your trees come from all over North America. In the past, did they come specifically from Wisconsin, or it's always been kind of a?
We used to get a lot of lumber out of Canada.
Oh, okay.
And like we did restoration at the state capitol in Madison.
Oh yeah.
And the windows in the state capitol were made out of cherry. And the state insisted the wood come from Wisconsin. You couldn't even get any cherry in Wisconsin. It all came out of Pennsylvania in the end. But then all the interior material came from Ohio. The rift oak all came out of, or most of it anyways, a lot of it.
That's the picture of his parents' house. Now, I
Yeah.
don't know if you can tell me how far back this is.
That's
Well, this is probably,
that's not the
Early-
house. That's
late-
the house Mavis lives in.
No,
That's
this
his
is-
parents' house.
this is the one on
Looks a
34th
lot
Street.
alike.
Yeah, they're very similar,
Okay.
very similar, yeah.
Yeah.
My uncle's house is bigger, Mavis's house is bigger than this one. It was built after my dad, so it was built bigger.
And you said, sorry, what year did you say that photo?
I would say it's the late 40s, early 50s. The trees are pretty small here.
Yeah.
This lot didn't have much on it at all. Like I say, it was the last lot on the east side of the street. There were 2 more lots on the west side of the street.
And maybe you
And,
This is the facility here, and I think this is the oldest picture for the facility here. And it was just all white.
Oh, wow.
yeah,
And then this one here.
the original facility was the 2-story thing in the middle.
So is this the oldest one then?
No, this is newer. This has got the slanty roof in the middle.
Okay.
The office was put out. This has got the little office that projected out in the front.
And that's this building?
That's this building.
Oh.
The
And
center
then
part, that's
transformed
2
into this.
stories, was the original shop.
Uh-huh.
They had a shop on 37th Street behind the house, and then the neighbors complained about the noise and everything else, and they put a stop to that. And they got this land down here. They bought it from this farmer, and
In what year?
I really don't know when it would start. They started the business in 32, so I would say they probably started here in 34,
Okay.
35, something like that.
And for a couple of years it was down
On 37th Street,
Okay.
yes, yeah.
I'd like to take a picture of this, or
Yeah.
or
That's fine.
okay.
Yeah.
Um,
The other pictures in there are all going to go into products that we build.
okay. I'll just take a peek. Do you currently do much? I think Mavis said she had to order some parts from you, or had you do the fence around her backyard?
No,
Or
we
do
wouldn't
you-
have done the fence, but we may have
Yeah.
made some replacement parts for trim for her.
Okay, that's
We
probably.
do mostly commercial work now.
Oh, okay. Let me think. My professor is really curious about tracking the employees so that we can get kind of a sense of the neighborhood, if this was ever a place where people lived and worked at the same time, or if it was always kind of a bedroom community. And from what you're describing, it was in the 30s and 40s.
Yeah, I'm trying to think, there was, well, my dad and uncle, they both lived close by, and then they had a fellow that was next door to my folks, worked here. And then there was a fellow that lived up on Good Hope Road, worked here. But other than that, I mean, people were from Wauwatosa and Milwaukee, and most of them drove here.
Okay.
And again, I'm talking from the 40s, mid 40s on.
Yeah.
It,
And let's see, without prying too much, I mean, in the past, was it a pretty good paying job to work for Lange Brothers, or I mean, or was it a kind of factory?
I think it was a regular factory wage. I mean, there was a union for many years, and they were under the carpenters union. They weren't paid like carpenters. They were paid a little less than that because they're working at the same place every day and they're working inside. But back in those days, almost all of them had their own house, and they had a car.
That's
because you didn't need the computer and the hi-fi and all this and iPad,
right.
iPhone.
And which we need them nowadays.
Right. But no, most of them, and I think like Lyle Fisher just lived over here.
Yeah, they all live.
They live fairly close. I mean, up north, I mean, we have people that come 20, 30 miles every
day.
each way.
Oh, wow.
And some of them carpool, are able to carpool with people. But now, I mean, they're all still fairly close, aren't they? Well, one's in Grafton,
No,
the two are in
people are
Grafton.
pretty spread out right now. People commute a lot further now than they did
Port
earlier
Washington,
on.
Grafton.
Yeah, we got people, Menominee Falls, Port Washington, Grafton, West Bend, coming every day.
Yeah, where I'm from, I had to drive at least 20 miles to get to work.
Mm-hmm.
In the past, did you ever use the train to transport things from Beecher to here? Is it
Beecher only started in the 80s.
Okay.
It's 15 years now, isn't it?
Yeah.
Okay.
So no, we've never used a train to transport between there. We have trucks that go back and forth on a weekly basis.
Uh-huh.
Now,
Years
you use
ago,
trains to
we
have
used
lumber
trains
come
to
in.
bring lumber in. Most of our lumber was brought in. We used to use a lot of pine lumber when we made windows and everything. That came from the West Coast, and that all came by railroad car.
Uh-huh.
And the lumber from Canada, even back when I was a kid, that came by truck.
Okay.
But I think pine was the biggest thing that came by rail. Everything else, all the plywood and everything we bought from distributors here in town, it would come in by truck and so forth. Might come to Milwaukee to the distributor by rail, and then it's broken down into smaller.
And do you kind of do you use mostly hardwood for the trim, and then or do you do trim with pine too?
You can do trim with pine, but most of the work that we do here are more the hardwoods.
Uh-huh.
We use a lot of cherry and quartered white oak and walnut and
Use a lot
maple.
more exotic woods today than we did years
really?
It all
ago.
depends on what the architects are designing.
I see. So so you work with architects a lot rather than, or
We work for the contractors.
okay. I see.
But the designs come from the architects, so it's a very
Yeah.
interesting
Yeah.
relationship. The contractors are actually the ones that pay us, but the architects are the ones that we follow their designs, and the end using customer is who gets our product. So,
yeah, I have an uncle who works in ventilation, and when I told him I was going into architecture school, he said he was kind of wary about architects.
uh-huh.
Just complications. So, let me think. I know there are a lot more questions. Could you tell me about? Are these pictures of this facility?
Some of them are just family pictures, but this is the way the front office here looked in the 50s, I want to say.
Yeah.
And these are some of the machines out in the shop. And this would have been, what a company photo
wow.
looked like back then. I'm
Yeah.
thinking, is that 50s or 40s here?
I'd love to take a picture of this. Do you know where this was?
There's a lake somewhere.
Lincoln Park. That's where we used to have the picnics always, in Lincoln Park over Estherbrook and Lincoln.
Yeah.
Lincoln is on Hampton and Green Bay Road.
Okay.
And we would have a picnic over there in the summertime. I think there was a sign up on the balcony a while ago. I assume it's still up there. So
I'm not sure after the
I think it's
rainstorm.
still up. Oh,
Was it
yeah.
every year or something?
Pardon?
Picnic?
We would have an annual picnic, all the employees and their families and everything.
And this is just how they stored lumber out in the shop. And this was the old dust collector system because there's a lot of dust made and you had to get it out of the plant.
Was it, and it was photographed because it was new, or just a?
I think so. I think we
Probably,
probably put
yeah.
the new one in. I've got photographs of my newer one too.
Well, it's a big change.
Well, and they're
Okay.
expensive. There are things that are expensive, but you don't really, no one,
Doesn't produce enough.
Yeah.
it's not like it's fancy, but it's like, okay. This is them making a door in one of the clamps. And I always get a kick because, the guys dress so differently than we do now. They almost look like dress pants where we got the jeans on and they got a hat on there working and you're like,
Yeah.
This is our lower shop. That was the newest of the buildings to be added on
Yeah.
in the 50s.
Built in 56, I think, 55 or 56.
And just some of the pieces of equipment.
Yeah. What is this?
This one?
Yeah. Is it?
That's one of your old molders, right?
Yes, yeah.
More photos of that new shop. This has got to be like the second oldest picture I think you have of the facility.
Yeah, it's got the swinging garage doors
Where
in
do you
the
think
front.
that was from?
Oh boy, late 40s.
Hmm.
So the facility has been remodeled many times?
Oh yes,
Many times.
many times. Added on, added on, added on.
So this part was taken off, and this leaning part was added.
If you look at it, this was actually built in front of it. See,
Yeah.
this two-story
This-
portion was
yeah.
here, and they just built out the front.
Yeah.
And so this bump out just,
became bigger.
yeah, it became swallowed up by the rest of it.
The original main wall kind of was that wall behind you, and then all this was added on at one time.
Mhm.
And there was a little bump out in the front here for a little office that a lady sat in, and then finally they put a brick front on it,
Mm.
tied it all together.
And the office looked very much like that one photo until just, 3 years ago when we remodeled.
Huh. Uh-huh.
This was adding on the warehouse at the far end.
Okay.
And then after they built the warehouse, then there's this building that got built in between them. So there's a close-up of, what the office looked like in the very beginning, and then here's that second look of the building.
Uh-huh.
And here's it with the filled in and all their trucks parked out front.
Those are beautiful. Yeah, those are wonderful.
Yeah.
This is a great photo.
And you can see sort of the background, how,
Yeah.
and there's all those trees and houses all back there already, but behind the railroad track to the next street, Mill Road, when we were growing up, was all just
It was
field
nothing.
too.
Yeah, it was all.
And then they filled it in
It was a city dump.
with a city dump.
It was a swamp, and then they filled it in, and they dumped it all full with garbage, basically.
Oh, really?
And leveled it off,
To
capped
fill
it off, yeah.
Oh, wow.
And now you
And
look back
can-
there, it's grown up with trees. It's
Right,
like a woods
right.
back there again.
Can you? So was the dump in this area or more off the photograph?
Yeah, it was directly behind us,
Oh,
it
it
would,
all the way
just
to
would be,
Latonia.
where you couldn't see it. It's just the other side of the railroad tracks.
Okay.
It's another photo of the front of the building, probably about the same time frame. 48 it says.
Oh,
These are just more family things. And this one, so
mm-hmm.
that's my dad's parents' house. And this is when they built the section in between the warehouse and this building. This is the back of his parents' house.
Mm.
Just another photo of that.
Yeah, the street.
Yeah, you can see the street, how, you're looking at this and going, okay, where is the street? There's no curbs, there's no
Yeah.
concrete, it's just
This
a
was the
gravel
end
road.
of the road. It was the end of the road. It was gravel from Silver Spring up. It was gravel.
Uh-huh.
And then it turned, and there was a hill coming up here. And just a big parking lot up here, and that was it.
And what, I don't know why, when I look at this picture, the thing that always shocks me is, okay, there's no concrete road, it's just a gravel road. And look at those high tension wires in the background.
Yeah, they were there.
They already had all that power going all over the place.
Right.
I always thought those would have been come
Oh, yeah, they
after
were
the
there a
road. I
long
don't know
time
why.
ago.
And what is this? Is it a?
Is that a mailbox there? Oh,
Yeah, that was a mailbox on the corner.
Oh, wow.
This is the road here, going through, and then they had the roads.
sort of laid out going into the subdivision.
Right, there was a mailbox there. And this sign was printed real big, so you could see it from, it was
Sherman?
Hopkins in those
Uh-huh.
days, then they combined it together with Sherman Boulevard. And you
Oh.
could see it, I mean, there was nothing over to Sherman, and they built all the buildings, and you can't see it anymore.
And so it was a big advertisement so trucks would be
Sure.
driving by and they'd
Right,
see
right,
that.
right.
Wow,
Everybody
I
can
wouldn't
see
have
that.
known
This business at the time was really famous, I'm guessing.
Well, it was one of the woodworking places in town. We did nothing but houses in those days, residential, all residential.
that. Mavis was telling me there were also a lot of furniture shops up here. Did you make? Oh, in Thurston Woods, is that correct? And did
Not
you?
really. There were a few restoration things. There's a fellow up the street here that does furniture refinishing and repairing.
Right.
Is he
Now.
still there?
Yeah.
Yeah, but
That's fairly new.
that's
old.
relatively new.
Hmm.
And there was one on Silver Spring, And Joe Kress, I don't think she would have known Joe Kress. He used to do a lot of furniture repairs. And, yeah, there's a lot of little one-man shops.
Okay.
And they're always around. And you kind of got to look for them, you know. It's kind of word of mouth as far as information in those.
Another interesting thing, we found out that in Berryland, when it was Berryland, when it was first built, they built wood shops in the basements for the returning vets, so that they had workshops.
I never heard of that, but they did. They all had coal furnaces.
Oh wow!
And we would dump wood out back here, and when they would see the truck pull out of the front of all our waste material, and they'd see the truck pull out of the front with the scrap on, they'd come running over here with coaster wagons. They picked up all the scrap, and then they changed everything to gas furnaces. And then our scrap pile got bigger and bigger and bigger. We had to come up with a different way of getting rid of it. They used to come over. It was unbelievable. You'd see the coaster wagons. You could just hear them coming. You know, all little coaster wagons. And they'd pick up the wood and keep their furnaces going.
So were the coal furnaces? Did they produce much soot?
Not that I'm aware. There was smoke in the wintertime. I mean, you know, every single house had a furnace going, and we. Interesting question. We had 2 wood stoves here, big furnaces, and we there was one near the washroom, and when anybody went to the bathroom or anything, he always threw some wood in the furnace, and it would smoke once in a while really bad. And there was outside, you know, out the chimney, and there was a smoke inspector in the city of Milwaukee, and he would come out here, and now he's smoking a big cigar. And he'd come in here, and you know, people would complain. Somebody would complain about the smoke, and the smoke inspector would come. And he was an old German, and he got along with my dad and uncle real well. Never had a fine or anything, but we'd have to kind of calm down. But I mean, when it was cold, they would just pour. We did use coal, but you know, we'd use as much wood as we could just to save money. Yeah. And the wood would make a lot of smoke, but I completely forgot about that.
And so people would complain about the smell or the...
Well, the neighbors would complain about the smoke, and then they'd call the city, and he'd come out here, and they'd sit and talk for a while. And it was over, and cut back on the fire a little bit.
We have a wood stove at my childhood home, too, so it's kind of a nice smell.
Yeah. Especially if you're burning natural wood, if you're burning, you know, logs. I mean, dried out logs. It's nice. Smells nice.
Let me think. If I have more questions, may I contact you again?
Anytime. Yeah.
Sure. And Lori, if I have questions, I'll send you an email. Because you seem like a busy person. But I'm really glad you brought the photos. Do you mind if I photograph them now?
No, go right ahead.
If we get a chance, we can also scan it.
If we, I mean, I think we'll review them and maybe the ones that the most important ones. Not that we like them all, but we might ask to come.
Whatever works for you.
Okay. Thank you so much.
That's it. Do you mind if I take it?
No, slide it right out.
What was it like doing the restoration at the Capitol? Did you?
Yeah, she took care of that.
How did?
I retired at that time.
The restoration of the Capitol was a fun project to work on. We worked on it for over 10 years. We had 3 different project managers manage the job because it would, you know, go so long. I was fortunate enough to manage the last wing. It was a great experience because the team they put together out there with J.P. Cullen was very forward-thinking, very before their time.
In what?
Well, you know, it's a historic reservation that can be very challenging, but they had a very open attitude about everything, and just the way they managed their meetings. They managed them very open and very much in the best interest of bringing the product to back to the historic best quality, I guess. lots of times you'll get in there and people have different agendas or
Oh.
power plays when you go to job site meetings or whatever, and that it just wasn't that way. And it was a very great group of people to work with, and it's of course quite a privilege to work on a building like that because it's a building that's going to be around for generations to come.
Yeah.
So it was a fun project.
Do you do a lot of historic preservation? You said now you're...
We do some of that also.
Uh-huh.
When the projects come along, we've not only done that, we also did the largest historic renovation of a house that burnt down out in Madison.
Oh, wow.
It was actually down the street from not the Capitol, but the governor's mansion.
House, yeah.
Oh, okay.
And that was a very interesting project too. We got pulled into because we worked on the state capitol. And the first time I went out there, it was you're going to this house, and the outside walls are still standing because it was that old construction of just cinder block walls and a slate roof, but the whole inside was burnt out and gone.
Oh.
And then they took me over to a warehouse, and in this warehouse they had piles that were leftovers from each room of the house.
Oh, wow.
And then they had photos that the owners had taken over the years that they sort of put together. Here are the photos of this room, here are the photos of that room, here are the photos of that room. So you got these photos and you got these piles of half burnt wood and half water damaged wood, and you had to
Put it
back together. And we had over 150 different profiles in the one house that had to be cut and ground for it. And it was just, it was just an interesting challenge to take on. And again, a real great group of people because, it was open for discussion and just really, everyone wanted to just make the product come back to what the customer wanted, which was not necessarily, I would have thought, okay, if they were doing this, maybe they wanted to improve the house or whatever. No, they wanted to bring it back to that historic state, which was really cool.
Yeah. It sounds like you enjoyed it a lot.
Yes.
Well, I'm going to snap a few shots.
Go right ahead.
I'll get this one. Okay.
Here, I can slip it back in for you.
Thank you.
Is Dave out of the house, or is he's here?
He wasn't back here, I think.
Oh,
Maybe they
think
just got back before I
this
came
one's
down here.
okay.
Yeah, that's right. So I'm gonna ask him so.
And next week we have an interview with George. Is he your brother or your cousin?
Cousin.
Okay.
Cousin. Boy, how did you get time with him?
Mavis, of course.
Yeah,
Mavis introduced
she
us
pulled
to
a
quite
few strings. Okay.
Yeah. Let's see.
He was president of the Wisconsin Medical Society last year,
Oh, wow.
so he's got a little more time this year.
And these are family photos?
Right.
Okay. Do you mind if I take a look? I'll just...
There are ones in the factory and things like that in there too. I think there's some as they,
There's...
that photo there
Uh-huh.
is my dad.
This one?
Yes.
Oh, this
Which one
is
is
you.
that?
Yes.
Uh-huh.
That's where we were working on the planer.
Uh-huh.
Oh, okay.
You've got to be a teenager.
Yeah.
I'm gonna take it. I'm gonna... Oops.
George was the ring bearer at my wedding. So it gives you an idea. He's a little younger than me. He's a great guy. Takes care of all of us.
Did either of you spend much time in Haven Woods as kids? Did you go there to...
That was a.
We weren't allowed over there. That was
No.
the military, wasn't it?
Yeah, that was a.
Right.
It was the County House of Correction when I was a kid.
Could you tell me more about that? We've
Okay.
we've found that out, but...
Okay.
Yeah.
And the head accountant over there was a good friend of our family, my dad. And so we would go over there and they would give us tours on Sundays. And it was a regular prison. I mean, it had wings of cell blocks. And then they had a furniture factory in the back, a woodworking furniture factory. And they made desks and just all kinds of furniture. And I don't know if it was for the county, or I would assume it was probably for the county, for the city, you know. But then to the south, down on Silver Spring, there was a large farm. And I mean a large farm, a large dairy farm. They did all their own dairy stuff and everything. And from that farm to the House of Correction up here, there was a tunnel underground that they could move the prisoners back and forth because they would go down and work in that farm. And the farm, I don't know, had 3 or 4 large barns. It was a big complex, but the House of Correction, that was all concrete and masonry and everything. And then during the war, I don't know exactly what happened, but the government took it over and it became a military disciplinary barracks, and people that had gone through anybody in the military that was
Be disciplined.
yeah, I can't think of the right word, but anyways, they ended up over here, and it was all full of American soldiers that had discipline problems, and then they also brought in a lot of German I think of the German prisoners, but I'm sure there was all kinds of prisoners over there. Not Japanese, but I think, Italian and whatnot else. Mm-hmm. And they would come over here. The woodworking factory had closed and or abandoned it. And so they would come over here for shavings for the farm. They still had the farm. And they used the shavings for bedding and everything. So they would come over here with trucks and a bunch of German, like 8, 9, 10 German prisoners would come over, and they'd shovel the shavings onto this truck and take it over there. And there was a man that worked here that had lost 2 sons in Europe, and he was just almost out of control when these people would come over here because he just felt one of these guys could have killed his sons. I mean, gives me goosebumps today to think about it. But I can remember those prisoners coming over here, and then the whole thing was abandoned. The government just abandoned it, and the Army Reserve. After I got out of the military, I did Army Reserve duty over there. They used the buildings for reserve meetings and everything. And finally they tore it all down and they built all that new stuff on Silver Spring. There's a whole Army Reserve complex on 51st and Silver Spring. They built all of that, and then they tore this down, and then it was abandoned, and then the state took it over, and now it's actually a state park from what I understand. And I've been over there a few times, but as kids, no, we never went over there. That was off limits. I mean, you didn't go near that place. And,
okay. And when you were stationed there in the guard, what did you do?
I was in the 961st Engineers. When I was in the Army, I was in the Engineer Corps, and then when I got out, I had 2 years in the Army and 4 years in the Reserves, and I was with the 961st, and I think they're still over here in Silver Spring.
Okay.
I had 1 meeting a week, and then 2 weeks in the summertime.
So did you live in the barracks here?
No. I
Oh,
was living here and working here,
Uh-huh.
and I would just go over there. We lived on 39th between Thurston and Silver Spring. We had built a house. We lived there till
70s.
70, 72 or something like that. Yeah, 73, because 72 we had the motorhome, the first motorhome, we had that here. So 73 probably we moved out to Mequon. And you asked earlier about the neighborhood and what changes we had seen.
Yeah, sure.
And as the road, as Silver Spring got bigger, I remember it going from a little 2-lane road to like a 4-lane. I mean, there were all kinds of little shops on 35th and Silver Spring. There was a baker. There were actually 2 bakers. There was a barber shop. There was a grocery store, 2 grocery stores. K&K was one of them. I mean, everything was right there. We could walk from the house. We could walk down, go to the grocery store, get a haircut, go to the drugstore. And had a fountain, a soda fountain in there, and the road got turned into a bigger road, and everything got. On the south side of Silver Spring, it got torn down. On the north side of Silver Spring, a lot of those buildings have been there for as long as I can remember. 60, 70, I'm 78 now, and the north side, those buildings have been there forever.
So at different points in your life, as a kid, as a teenager, as an adult, a young adult, and a married man, where were the places you liked to spend your time in Thurston Woods? Or where were the places you spent most of your time as a kid?
Working.
We
worked
where did you enjoy, or not that work's not enjoyable.
Yeah,
but,
no, I mean, we've always worked, and the kids all worked. My first jobs were in the greenhouses along Daytonia, and but every summer we would go on a trip for 2 weeks, and we went out east once with the car, and we went out to Banff, I think 3 times, and then down to Hoover Dam once. But otherwise, we would work. As kids, I mean, I started here when I was 14. So before that, probably 2 years, I worked in greenhouses and some truck farms, vegetable farms. Before that, we just played around in the neighborhood. And I would say when I was 14, 15, it was just building up all over around out there. All the play areas, the fields and everything were all gone. And we never went much to movies. There was the Ritz Theater on Villard. And I don't know, my folks for some reason they just, didn't want us to go to those places.
Laurie, where did you
Can I
spend
call you back, Molly?
Where did you spend your time as a kid?
Yeah. Okay, man.
Like I said, my parents wouldn't let me go to the movies either.
Oh.
on Saturdays, all the kids in the neighborhood, there was like 6 kids that we chummed around with when we lived up here on 37th Street. And they all went to the movie. I remember it was a nickel, And I mean, that was a lot of money back in those days, even a nickel. And then my folks and I, we would stay home. When President Roosevelt died, the kids were all out playing in the street, and we had to stay in the house that day. I mean, just that's the way my folks were. I mean, it's a lot of respect.
There are a couple places that other people I've interviewed have talked about. There's one called the Copper Hearth. Did you ever
Yes.
go there?
I'm trying to think. That was over on Titonia, and it was a restaurant and a bar. And there's a woods there, and that whole woods was a picnic area. There's a Catholic school was built there. There's still I don't know if it's still a home for sisters there or not. But from 35th to Titonia on the south side of Florist, that's where that Copper Hearth was. And there was a bar. There was a big barn there for years, and it was a bar, and they had barn dances and stuff. And then behind it was the woods, and in the summertime they would have little festivals there, and carnival would come in and stuff. But the place we went was on Villard. It was Shorty's, and that was another restaurant. And it's all where that new library and building on the south side of south side of Villard, from 35th over to 34th or whatever it is there. That big building was built there. There was a restaurant there. And the North Milwaukee Kiwanis was in that building. I haven't been on Villard for I was on Villard a couple of weeks ago, but I hadn't been on it for a long time. And at our church, there's a lady that had a grocery store. Her parents had a grocery store in Villard, so I was telling her about it. She hadn't been there for 30 years probably, but her store is still there, and it's still a little, somebody's running a little grocery store.
There was always that bakery down there on Villard, too.
Yes,
We
Wilbert's.
used to get our donuts down there.
On 37th and Villard was a bakery, Wilbert's Bakery. It was really, you'd wait in line there. I mean, it was unreal. It was good stuff.
Laurie, when you were a teenager, where did you hang out?
When I was a teenager, I lived in Mequon.
Oh, okay.
I lived here until I was in 6th grade.
Okay.
So
where did you hang out? I never found out.
when I was in high school, I don't think we want to have that on tape.
Okay, that's fine. Well, I'm going to go ahead and do you mind if I photograph this page?
No, go right ahead.
Whatever you want.
Is this this workshop? Is this in your grandparents' house, Laurie?
Oh, whose workbench is that?
Let me see the other colors.
That's Omanopa's front hall.
Yeah, this is down in the basement.
Is that your dad's shop?
Yeah, at the basement of the house. That
Okay.
was Wally and mine, kind of. My dad made that workbench and gave it to us for Christmas once. So I was just thinking they're keeping us working.
Mavis has kind of turned your uncle's old work area into her work area, but
Okay.
but it's a kitchen now.
Oh, okay.
So she's got a kitchen downstairs.
Yeah,
she has
yeah,
two
yeah.
kitchens.
She likes to cook.
She does. And I'll take a few pictures here. I might come back and ask to scan this photo.
Uh-huh.
Let's see. Block the light. It seems like there are a lot of wood shops around here. Everybody had their own workbench, and
Well, I think wood. A lot of people like to work with wood.
I interviewed a man named Michael Shue. He lives down on Oriole, and he worked at the Copper Hearth from '69 to '75.
Okay.
He does a lot of birdhouse making. He gave us a couple birdhouses
Yeah, yeah.
after the interview. It was really sweet. Let's see. Could you tilt it up? We'll be done.
That's okay. I'm gonna go out and get something out of my truck. Right out in the warehouse.
Or there's like a bright light in
It's reflecting my hands, but it's okay, we can see this. And that picture with the trucks in front of the building.
I think that might be farther back, that one.
Oh, I would like to get a picture of him working.
it. Do you want
I think you can slide them out.
Okay. Thank you. And thank you for gathering these. I hope
Oh,
it
no
wasn't
problem.
too much
No,
work.
we have them sitting around.
Okay.
We actually have some of them on our website even,
Oh, okay. I should have taken a better look.
on the history of our company. You have to go to the history one.
Okay.
Our grandfather and my great uncle, who started the business, they actually learned the trade in Germany from their father.
Oh, wow.
And so I think the oldest shot here, yeah, this one here is actually a photo of their plant in Europe.
Oh, okay.
Now, I went back there a few years ago. Where it is in Europe now, it's actually in Poland. When they were growing up, it was Germany, but that was way before World War
Yeah.
II. And after everything got settled, it became a hotel. And so we went back over there a few years ago to go visit and see it. And it was so interesting because things just change so, you look at how things change here and you don't always, they just change in every day, so you don't take it for granted. And someone who's been gone for a long time, you're like, oh wow, everything's changed. And going back to this place, this photo was taken in the early 70s when my uncle went back there.
Uh-huh.
We went back there in the 2000s, and it looks exactly the same. And the houses look, and I went there with my dad's cousin, who also lived at this house and grew up in this factory, and he was like, oh my God, this hasn't changed. We went to the church where they went to church, and it's like nothing's changed. It's like sort of stepping back. It's the closest thing to being in a time machine, I guess, is my feeling. It's like stepping back into history and sort of being there. We got to go into their house where they grew up, and to have our uncle along to explain all these different things to us, about how, oh my gosh, this is the same staircase, this is the same door, this is the window we put our stockings out in winter and got our...
It didn't change?
No, it was there. But the house had been divided into 4 houses that they lived in. And the people let us right into the house, and they invited us into the rooms. And we couldn't speak their language. They spoke Polish, and, we had 2 people who could speak fluent German and one who could speak a little bit of Polish. And they led us up to the house where, into the bedroom where my uncle and his younger brother were both with us, slept. And so it was just a really
It's amazing.
amazing thing to go there with. We would have never realized it unless we had them with us to hear all the stories.
Is this also the gathering, or this is a family?
Pabst. I think. Abda, do you see any pictures you'd like to photograph?
You good?
I'm gonna take a picture of this one if you don't mind.
What are they doing?
I think that's at one of their grill outs.
Oh, yeah.
Are these hats common? Those big wide brim.
Oh, I don't know. You'd have to ask my dad that they're common. I don't know
Yeah.
about that. But I know they always had some characters.
And can you tell me a bit more about this photo?
Well, that's my grandfather.
This is really nice.
Is he at home or is he?
That photo of Opa. He's at home, right?
Yeah, that was in his house.
Okay.
Is that with the dog? Or? No.
No.
It's
Well,
There's
their,
one-
their goofy hats that they have on here. Is there a story behind that?
No.
Yeah, I think. Do you mind if I photograph
Just
this
goofy
one?
guys. These were Cioli, Joe Varoxer, and Collins. And Collins lived
Collins?
next door to us up on
Yep.
37th Street.
No story. They're just having fun.
It was a
I think I
picnic.
have a similar photo of me with a sausage. Something.
I don't know, for some reason I find this really amazing.
It's a
just,
beautiful photograph.
like, capture that moment.
Uh-huh.
Well, thank you for sharing.
Thank you so much.
You're welcome.
Now I'm going to stop this now.